So, as we discussed last time, the Roman interests were skewing further and further away from live performances. They still had them, but their importance in the society was diminishing. And as those were going down, those forms of entertainment that we talked about last time were on the rise. So, as you can imagine, with theater kind of having a reduced importance in Roman society, there weren't a lot of structures being built specifically to house theater like there were with the Greeks. But that doesn't mean that the Romans weren't building some impressive structures. If nothing else, you can say this for the Romans: they were brilliant engineers. And some of the structures that they designed and built, considering that they had to do so much of it by hand and using only the techniques that were available to them, it's staggering. And to house these new forms of entertainment that were becoming so popular, the Romans constructed several really impressive buildings with which to stage these events. We were going to talk right now about the two most important ones, so let's take a look. So the first major structure that I want you to be familiar with is this one. This is the Circus Maximus. So this was an arena constructed solely for the purpose of chariot races. So this shows you just how big the sport of chariot racing was, that they would go through the trouble of constructing this incredibly large and incredibly ornate stadium just to house it. It was constructed somewhere around 600 BC, and it was the first and largest stadium in ancient Rome. Measures about 2,037 feet in length and about 387 feet in width, and could accommodate about 150,000 spectators. So this was quite the undertaking, especially when you consider that they were doing a lot of it by hand using the technology at the time. That is quite an accomplishment. Main thing I want you to take away is that this was the primary location for the chariot races. The Circus Maximus was a very, very impressive structure, but most people would agree that the crown jewel of the Roman Empire in terms of architecture was the Colosseum, which was built somewhere around AD 80. Literally meant to be the crown jewel. It stands near the center of the city and was commissioned by the emperors as a symbol of their undying power. So this was the primary location for all of the other forms of entertainment that we talked about in the last video. It was the largest amphitheater ever built up to that time, holding anywhere between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators. This was the Madison Square Garden of its day, and it played host not only to the gladiator battles, animal fights, and naval reenactments that we discussed previously, but also executions, reenactments of famous battles. A few of the dramas that were being produced would be done here that were based on Roman mythology. For a time, the Colosseum was the epicenter of Roman culture. And you can see the extreme engineering talent that had to go into the planning and construction of this building. So if you take a look at the second image here, the one of the ruins, and you can see the interior of the structure, a couple things to point out. You notice that the orchestra, in other words, the playing area, the circular spot there in the center, has kind of been cut in half. So the floor has been removed from the upper half of it, and you can see into it. That, we believe, is the holding area where the gladiators would prepare to go out into the main arena for their fighting. We also believe that this is the pens where the various animals would be kept in preparation for their fights. You can see along the perimeter various seating areas, There will be a supplemental video connected to this one, which will talk about how the seating was arranged. And you can also see a couple of square cuts in the structure there towards the top. Some theorize that is where they would lower the aqueduct system to flood the arena for the naval battles. We're not 100% sure on that, but it is what we theorize. There is one piece of this structure that I want to point out just because it's interesting as to where it got its name, and also that it is one of the contributions that modern theaters have taken from Roman architecture. So if we look at the upper echelon of the Colosseum, you can see all of these little entrances, these audience entranceways, very similar to, again, if you go to some place like the FedEx Forum, the various entranceways that you take to get to your seat when you go to a game or whatever. So these have a very specific name. These are called vomitoriums because of the specific purpose that they served. Now, we have spoken of the extreme excess of ancient Rome and the gluttony that just ran rampant through the empire, and that just continued to grow as the empire grew and gained in strength and territory. Nothing showed success like excess. And for the Roman people, going to the Colosseum was, again, a lot like going to any modern sporting arena. You'd have different types of food available, different types of drink, and you'd want to sample as many of them as possible. So what would happen is a person would eat and eat and eat and eat and drink and drink and drink and drink and eat and eat and eat and eat and drink and drink and drink and drink until their bodies literally could not handle any more food or drink, at which time they would get up from their seats, politely excuse themselves, head into one of these areas, these vomitoriums, and there they would refund the purchase, let's say. They would do as the name suggests. They would clear the calendar. And having done that, they would return to their seat and continue to eat and eat and eat and eat and drink and drink and drink and drink. So this major architectural feature of the Colosseum and a lot of Roman theatrical structures was put there basically so the patrons could gorge themselves to the point of annihilation and then go back and do it some more. What makes this even funnier is that this is one of the features that modern day architecture takes into account and includes in several modern day theaters. You can see here, this is a photo of what we would call a vom. You find these mostly in thrust and arena style theaters. Remember, that's thrust being any stage that juts out into the audience and has audience on three sides, an arena being an audience on all four sides. So in those instances, the actors need places to get on and off stage, so you have these little breaks in the seating arrangements that lead to the backstage area, usually underneath the seats. And this is called a vom, taken from the Roman word vomitorium. Nothing that will ever show up on a test, but just one of those gross little factoids from history that make studying this oh so satisfying.